Hi, welcome to Economics. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has just finished her budget speech, one of the longest in recent times, 2.5 hours. This budget was supposed to be the budget that would rescue the Indian economy. Has it lived up to that promise? We have Professor Patnaik, who will talk to us about it. Please send us your questions and Ila will also answer them. Hi Ila. So, was this the big bang budget that everyone was expecting?
See, she began with saying that this would boost investment. She was looking to boost growth, purchasing power, jobs. But I think it fell short of expectations because there was no some big thing that will give us higher growth. There are a few good things in the budget, no doubt. I mean, there is removal of dividend distribution tax, and maybe some households will save because of the new tax slabs. But the big bang that people were expecting in terms of there would be a boost to demand, that wasn't really there. The other thing that seems to have disappointed people seems to be that in investment, while yes, there was a removal of the dividend distribution tax and some changes in how foreign investors can invest or NRIs in corporate bond, where is the money for all the big investment going to come from? Disinvestment targets were not met last year, and this time I think it's going to be equally difficult, if not more difficult.
So there were five key areas which everybody was focusing on very closely because of the numbers, because of the way the economy has moved in the last year. Fiscal deficit. What are your thoughts on the numbers that were announced? 3.8 for this year, 3.5 target for next year.
See, she had to go to 3.8 because I think the numbers are already showing that there was going to be a slippage. Fortunately, the new FRBM allows her to deviate under certain circumstances from the target. So I think she's used that opportunity. Maybe we'll find that the deficit is even more than 3.8, but because she had this opportunity of going 0.5% above the target, and so she could go from 3.3 to 3.8, she has utilized that opportunity. I'm glad she did, because trying to show that the deficit was lower would have been perhaps not very credible, because the numbers are just not there. So she's done well on that.
On borrowings, are you happy with the numbers they have shown in terms of borrowings for the coming year?
See, I don't know all the details, but they're not out yet. But when we look at the disinvestment target, and this time it is a lot of disinvestment from LIC, it would... if it goes through, if the IPO goes through, then maybe they'll be able to raise that money. Now, in the accounts of any life insurance company, as we know from the AIG story at the time of the crisis, here also for LIC, this is one of the most opaque institutions you have. LIC has been acquiring a lot of bad companies. So the answer to your question will really lie in whether they're able to do that during the year or not.
Because even this year, their ability to meet that target of 1.05 lakh crore has been quite poor.
Yeah, apparently only 18,000 crore or so have been raised, and they have depended on strategic disinvestments. And, disinvestment is not just politically difficult. It is also difficult because you have these loss-making companies that people don't even want to buy. So you might want to sell profit-making companies so that you have buyers for them. And that is politically difficult. And the loss-making companies are just not attractive propositions. So, they're trying to do Air India, they're, BPCL. They're trying to make them less unattractive in the process of doing disinvestment. But, it takes time. It takes time. The accounts are difficult. The politics is difficult. If the company is loss-making for years and years, then nobody wants to take it on. So, yes, it's going to be a very dicey.
And your quick take on the revenue and expenditure numbers the finance minister talked about?
So she's assuming a nominal GDP growth rate of 10%. And given that unless she's assuming that tax buoyancy is going to go up very much, because she didn't explicitly say that she was assuming that, then maybe the tax and revenue numbers are not that off. The tax numbers may not be that off, but revenue includes disinvestment proceeds, so that just might be a bit more off than as we just discussed. Let's hope that the new tax system administration improves rather than compared to what happened last year, where it was very difficult.
So that brings us to the tax measures, Ela. A lot of new slabs announced for personal income tax, some tinkering here and there. They've actually ended up creating a second personal income tax system. Does that make sense? Our tax systems are already very complicated.
Yeah, Finance Minister began saying that this is to simplify, rationalize the tax system, and that people should not need to go to a chartered accountant before paying their income tax. Now, will less people go to chartered accountants, or more people go to chartered accountants, because first they have to figure out which tax system to follow, which one will give them less tax burden. So I am not sure that objective was achieved. Also, this seems to be small tinkering. One concern I have is that because we don't know the details yet, are the exemptions for long-term savings being removed? That is a big concern, because we are now talking of stepping up investment in infrastructure, which is long-term investment hugely, and you want incentives for long-term savings. So if you are going to, I don't know that it's going to happen, but we don't know what exemptions are being removed. But if they are going to be removed, you might end up in having less long-term savings. And that is going to be further detrimental to the financing of infrastructure investment that we want to actually step up. So that's a concern.
Will some of that be made up by easing investment for foreign portfolio investors into Indian bonds? So they're somehow expanding the bond market?
Think about the balance of payment issue. Foreign investors, you can 2.5 or so percent current account deficit, and you get more investment. Maybe you'll go up to a 3.5% current account deficit. Beyond that, it really has to be domestic. It is domestic savings that have reduced. You want domestic savings to GDP ratio to improve, because you want them to be financed domestically. You start getting too much capital from abroad, then you will get into balance of payment crisis. The rupee will appreciate, your imports will become cheaper. So or you may start trying to intervene. So you'll get into balance of payment difficulties if you are going to borrow too much from abroad in any manner.
So the one point we kept discussing in the run-up to the budget was the government and the finance minister has to be honest about numbers. They have to come out with real numbers and not do jugglery with data. Does this budget give you that impression that they've tried to do that?
I think to some extent it does, because, for example, she says that there will be an appendix which will have the details of government borrowings where the central government pays interest, so which may not be appearing in the fiscal deficit. So let's hope that, when we get a chance to look at it, let's hope that CAG is more satisfied with that than he was with the previous budget numbers and FRBM target meeting.
Ela, let's take some questions we've got from our viewers. Jignesh Sharma is asking us, is the current budget motivated by politics or by economics? And is it achievable or too much of an overestimation?
I feel that the budget was not such a big political statement. It was rather subdued. It wasn't that she came up with many big things to, make a big political statement in the budget. Yes, she spoke about economic development, aspirations, caring, and there are schemes. But I did not feel that this was too much of a political budget. And the numbers seem to be... The numbers, it's not as if they're posing the numbers to be looking very good. I mean, when she's going to do a 3.8 fiscal deficit, then she is in some manner saying that, yes, things are bad and I need to deviate from the target of 3.3.
Galacto, 1 second, I'll just... Just a moment. Galacto asks us, what have they done to improve consumption?
Now, listening to the speech, you have these first 15, 16 points on how they're going to improve things in the rural economy and the agricultural sector. And it doesn't seem to be something that is being done very directly, but the attempt seems to be things like we will help encourage state governments who adopt model agricultural laws, or we will do PM Kisan, Kusum schemes. We'll do agricultural warehousing, and agricultural warehousing is something that helps. And I think it's just many of those things that should normally be done as part of the reform process, because we know that agriculture is a big problem. I'm not sure that they are going to directly address the problem of demand, which is why I began with saying that, it doesn't seem to be living up to the promise of pushing demand, pushing purchasing power.
The other point I wanted to make to Jignesh Sharma's question is that whether it is motivated by politics or economics, there's no election to fight now. The next election is at least 4 years away, so they don't have to present a budget motivated by politics.
Yeah. And no very big schemes. So, the Nal Se Jal and Jeevan, the Jal water schemes were there. They had been announced last year. Some allocation is always that initially when you announce a scheme, a very small allocation has been made, particularly in the two Modi regimes, that it's not that when a scheme is announced, a big allocation is made. It is when it starts getting implemented and you come up with the need for spending more that allocations increase. So some of that has happened. It's not that any very big allocations, any big statues, none of that has happened. No, or that Namami Gange or any of those political things haven't really aren't seen in this budget.
We have a question from Anindya Mitra. How does the 102 lakh crore target for investment into infrastructure in the next few years tie in to this year's budget?
So I think she announced that there would be two entities. One would be the NIIF and another entity that would be leveraging some of the money that is being given to them to enhance infrastructure investment. The 102 lakh crores is actually across all sectors, cities, across various ports, airports, roads, hospitals, universities, education institutions, schools. So it's not specifically for one particular sector or even what we would normally understand as infrastructure, transport related or power related infrastructure, but it's a very wide definition of infrastructure. And these are projects in the pipeline. So national investment pipeline is where these are projects that are announced or underway, whether private sector, whether public sector, whether state government, local government. And that's what this 102 lakh crore is about. That's in terms of what it is. And then how is it being financed? You've got local bodies, you've got private sector. This includes private sector as well. So private sector which has resources. So all of those are being included in this pipeline. And of course, the big challenge would be how is the government going to raise the resources for the part that it has to do.
Tushar Kumar has a question which I'm not sure, it doesn't come across very clearly. Which is a better model, an income-based model or an expenditure-based model? Do you get what he is trying to ask? Okay, we'll move on to the next question. Sorry, Tushar, we couldn't get a question very clearly. There is a question from Mahaprasad Nanda. What more market sector reforms and legal reforms are needed to liberalize, to boost growth and create jobs and better manage human resources?
So, market-based reforms, I would say, if you look at the economic survey which just came out yesterday, it talks about how the government should not interfere in agricultural markets. It should not. It should repeal the Essential Commodities Act. The Food Corporation of India needs reforms, or the drugs and pharmaceutical policy where you set prices that needs reforms. So those are some of the reforms in financial sector, particularly. We have this huge mismatch between long-term savings and long-term investments, and we need to do bond market reforms. Now, what has been done is that the limits for corporate bonds have been increased, for what foreigners can invest in corporate bonds have been increased. But what we needed far more was, how is the bond market going to be made more deep and liquid? The public sector debt management agency is a proposal that's been on the cards. That's something that needed to be done. Another thing is how to increase competition in banking. And while she has said that she would like to have more private capital come into banking, and she has increased the deposit insurance corporation limits from 1 lakh to 5 lakh, but what you need much more at this time is to have a more comprehensive resolution authority framework, maybe bring back the FRDI bill now that you've raised these limits from 1 lakh to 5 lakh, maybe that allows private sector banks to fail failure basically means somebody to be able to buy up that bank based on their business assessment of the bank. And so those are the kind of reforms that one could have looked for. Many, many more. I mean, the list is so long that I don't think we can, go into the whole list. Just illustrative.
Jose Roy has a question. He says, when people don't have jobs, what's the point of giving tax cuts? Is that fair?
Well, tax cuts are given so that demand is stimulated. If people spend more, then jobs get created when there is a shortage of demand. So, I mean, if it's just a cynical question, that's one thing. But if it's a genuine question, then yes, when there is a slowdown in demand, then tax cuts is certainly a way to, when in fact you have more unemployment, you do tax cuts so that you have expansionary fiscal policy. Basically, you're putting money into the hands of people. You're putting money into people's pockets. They go out and spend that money. There is a multiplier effect. More people get jobs, and that's the way that it creates jobs. More spending creates jobs, and so that's why you do tax cuts. I'm not saying that the tax cuts done in this budget were adequate, but yes, that is certainly the classical way to boost demand.
Prajwal Bagrecha is asking us, is nominal GDP growth of 10% possible? If it is possible, how?
Suppose you have GDP growth of 4.5%, real GDP growth of 4.5%, and inflation of 5.5%. You're still within the target of 2 to 6%, which is the inflation target. The target is 4, but you have a band of 2 to 6. So you're still within that. And then GDP growth, let's say it's still 4.5 is not something that is completely, unrealistic. So yes, you can get a nominal GDP growth rate, which is a sum of the real GDP growth and the inflation that you will experience. 10 is possible.
I think we're already there. Saumik Bhattacharya is asking us, Ila, with the change of slabs in personal income tax and the optional aspects that the finance minister has announced, has the personal income tax system been made simple or more complicated, which I think you addressed initially. Yeah. And to answer you, Saumik, Ila basically said that it seems like it has become a little more complicated than it already is.
It seems to be, because first one will have to figure out what one would get if one went the path of exemptions or if one went with the new system. And having done that, maybe if you decided that you would go with the new system, then it's much simpler. If if you can do that, yeah.
S. Kumar, this is like you have to read the tea leaves, Ila. How much time will it take for the economy to recover after this budget?
I don't think this budget is going to be a point of turnaround for the economy to recover. We're actually seeing some small signs of recovery. So I must say that last couple of months, while before December we only saw a decline in almost every indicator, but last couple of months cars have done a little better, some companies have done a little better. So I don't think this budget is a turning point for that. The question really before us is does this give the kind of demand impetus that the economy needed? And I'm not sure that it did.
Rushant Pawar, we have one or two more last questions, Ila. Has the budget done enough for the farm sector, which has already been ailing and failing?
They've announced a number of very detailed schemes for the farm sector. What might have also helped would have been things that the Economic Survey talked about, which we just mentioned, like the Essential Commodities Act. In the model acts that the Finance Minister talked about, did she talk about the model APMC as well?
There is some talk about reform.
So if there is a reform of the APMC, if there is warehousing, now these are not things that will have an immediate impact, but yes, they will help allowing agricultural markets to function, which today are very, very constrained by existing laws.
Harsh Ganatra is asking us, Ila, whether demand has this budget succeeded in boosting demand, or will it succeed in boosting demand? We just discussed that one. So, from all the questions we've got and from the reaction of the stock markets before we began, they were really down 1.5% to 2% just after the budget. Do you think, to summarize and sum up our live discussion, the expectations were very high from this budget?
So I think, yes, expectations were very high. People were thinking that the long-term capital gains tax would go, that there would be some big stimulus for pushing investment and demand. What you do see is a few good things. You see the dividend distribution tax go. You got now LIC, IPO will come up, and that will do a whole lot of good. But, the expectations, I think, because of the slowdown in the economy, the expectations exceeded what the minister or the government could deliver, because their hands are pretty tight. I mean, there is very little fiscal space. So, yes, I think it didn't meet expectations.
So, would you like to give a number, a rating for this budget, which everyone tries and asks for every budget?
Absolutely not, because I think this was a very, very difficult budget to make to begin with. I mean, we've been talking about that in the last couple of weeks, that it was a very difficult budget to make, and I think she should, whatever she tried, let's hope she succeeds in what she tried, and all the best to her, because we all want the economy to recover. We don't want to make points and show anybody down.
We all want the economy to recover, and hopefully the measures that have been announced, and this is not also the end of the measures. The government will continue to come up, hopefully, with more steps as we go into the new financial year. Thanks for watching this live special edition of Ilanomics. We will come back with a regular edition next week, and also do read Ila's column on theprint.in later today, where she will be writing about the budget, and subscribe to our print channel on YouTube.